Hello and a warm welcome to yet another episode of Procurement Shorts, your one-stop shop for everything happening in the world of procurement and supply chain, and how it impacts the way you do business. Let's take a look at all that made headlines when you were away. Slowing auto component supplies from China have finally made their impact felt in Europe. Earlier this week, the continent saw sales of new vehicles in April decline for the 10th month in a row. The fall is being seen as an impact of China locking down key industrial centers for weeks on end in the aftermath of escalating COVID cases. According to data released by the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, registrations for new vehicles in April fell by 20% to just about 830,447 vehicles, the lowest in April in well over a decade, with the exception of 2020. The worst automobile maker was Stellantis, which registered a 32% fall in sales, while Italy was the worst performing market, seeing a 33% drop. The latest findings also indicate that the first 4 months of 2022 alone have seen a 14% drop in sales when compared to last year. Lockdown-induced delays in component supplies from China have led to supply chain and logistics disruptions. This has led to a twofold increase in lead times when compared to pre-pandemic levels. The situation is expected to continue for the short term, which could increase the price of castings and other components by 2 to 4%, supported by increase in freight rates and demand-supply gaps. The good news, though, is that raw material prices in China have witnessed a decrease of 5% this month. However, given that global OEM demand remains stable, the delays have impacted buyers sourcing procurements from China. Indications are that car makers could look for alternatives closer home to Europe for future procurements. Meanwhile, China's insistence on locking down cities that are seeing a spike in COVID cases is making life difficult for the European Union and the G7. Both international organizations have continued individual campaigns on boycotting Russian oil and trade in general. However, China's pace, or the lack of it, in getting supply chains back on track is piling pressure on countries committed to boycotting trade with Russia. For better understanding, here's a slice of how the China lockdown is impacting trade and procurements across the world. Shanghai alone accounts for more than 20% of China's total exports and nearly 8% of the country's manufactured exports. The city is also the largest and busiest port in the world. It handled 43.5 million TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units, in 2020 alone. That's a whopping 20% more than the world's second largest port, Singapore. Similarly, Russia handles a relatively smaller but significant average cargo throughput of 4.1 million TEUs every year. In the first 4 months of 2022 alone, China manufactured a whopping 336 billion tons of crude steel, which in itself was a 10.3% drop from last year's levels. At the same time, European steel prices have surged as supply chains have suffered the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war. Procurements of iron ore pellets have been impacted across Europe, given that both Russia and Ukraine are major players in this market. China, on its part, contributes to 53% of the world's steel supply. Earlier this week, wheat prices in Europe hit a new high after India imposed a blanket ban on exporting the cereal. Now, packaged foods companies in Germany are having trouble procuring fruit and nuts from suppliers in the US, Australia, and Turkey, among other countries. The Mariani Nut Company, Green and Gold Macadamias, and their sourcing partners have reported facing trouble while procuring produce from California, South Africa, and Turkey. The evergreen incident in the Suez after COVID cut off global supply chains for months together, followed by the war in Ukraine have cut off key supply chains to the country. Turkey's unusual frost a few months ago also played a part in straining supplies. However, these companies are now banking on an end-of-season nut harvest in California to make up for poor supplies so far. But procurement costs will hit the roof, partly due to fewer supplies from source markets and skyrocketing freight prices too. Some research reports indicate that the prices of apricots, blueberries, and macadamias could go up by 25 to 30% in Europe. What's worse, shipping delays could still mean delayed supplies, even at premium wholesale prices. This, suppliers say, could make it difficult to meet procurement targets. Further, a shortage and across-the-board price hike in packaging materials is only making matters worse for these companies. That's all the time we have on this edition of Procurement Shorts. In the meanwhile, log into bureaulive.ai to keep pace with more news and updates. Until next time, it's goodbye from us.